Before you keep reading, drop a comment and tell me, what city are you watching from? I love seeing where all of you are, and if you're new here, welcome to Crimson Secrets. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this one now. Let me tell you about the day. Weston Hale finally understood what he had thrown away. He was sitting in a leather chair that cost more than most people's cars in a corner office on the 41st floor of a building with his last name on the side of it. And he was holding a press release he had not written and could not stop reading. The woman in the photograph at the top of the page was wearing a gray blazer and a calm expression. Her hair was pulled back the same way she used to pull it back on Sunday mornings when she thought no one was watching. Her eyes were the same. Everything else was different. The caption beneath the photo read, Lynnette Hale, now Lynnette Oakes, named CEO of Vantara Technologies. Company valuation expected to exceed $800 million by Q3. Weston set the paper down, then he picked it up again. He had a wife once. A quiet one. She made coffee before he woke up and left it on the counter with the lid on, so it would stay warm. She read in the evenings. She laughed softly at things that weren't that funny. She was, in his honest estimation at the time, ordinary. He had married her 12 years ago because she was kind, and he was 29, and the whole thing had seemed reasonable. He had stopped paying attention to her somewhere around year 3. By year 7, he had stopped pretending. He never thought she was paying attention either. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about almost everything. Lynnette Oakes was 38 years old, and the morning she walked out of the Hale house on Greystone Lane, she took 4 things with her. A suitcase, a leather portfolio full of documents Weston had never thought to ask about, a carved wooden box her father had given her when she was 9, and her composure. She did not take the rings. She left them on the kitchen counter. She had known for 11 months. That was how long she had known about the woman her husband was seeing, a marketing consultant named Britta, who wore very expensive shoes and called Weston by a nickname that Lynnette had never used and had never wanted. She had found out, the way wives usually find out, not through anything dramatic, not through lipstick or receipts or a stranger's perfume, but through a quiet accumulation of small absences. The way he stopped asking about her day, the way he flinched slightly when his phone lit up in the evenings, the way he looked at her sometimes with a kind of weary guilt that he had clearly decided to live with rather than address. Lynnette had a gift for noticing things and saying nothing. She had learned it young. Her mother had been a woman who filled every silence with noise, and Lynnette had grown up understanding that stillness was its own kind of power. Her father had known it too. He was an engineer, quiet and methodical, and he used to sit with her in his workshop when she was small and show her how things were built. Not just physical things. Ideas, systems. He would draw diagrams on yellow legal pads and explain how a structure only holds if every element is doing its job. Understand the whole thing before you touch any part of it, he used to say. Patience is not the same as passivity. She had never forgotten that. So when she found out about Britta, she did not confront. She got very, very still. And then, slowly, methodically, she began to finish what she had already started. Because here is the thing Weston Hale never knew about his wife. She had been working on something for 4 years. She had started it quietly, in the evenings after dinner, while he was watching television or on calls with people he considered more important. She had a degree in systems engineering that she had put aside when they moved for his career. She had a mind that could hold 20 variables at once and find the one that didn't fit. She had a problem she had noticed in the logistics software industry. A specific, fixable problem that nobody had properly addressed because the people in the industry were too embedded in old infrastructure to see it clearly. And she had been building a solution, not in a lab, not with investors. Just in notebooks, first. Then in a rented server space she paid for out of her own savings account, the one Weston didn't know about. Then with a small team of people she had found carefully, one at a time, people who were underpaid at their current jobs and brilliant and hungry. By the time she found out about Britta, Lynnette had 2 provisional patents, a working prototype, and a letter of intent from a mid-sized distribution company in Ohio that wanted to pilot her system. She had not told Weston. She had waited and her father's voice, "Understand the whole thing before you touch any part of it." She understood the whole thing now. She filed for divorce on a Tuesday. She did it quietly, through an attorney she had hired 8 months earlier. Because Lynnette Oakes did nothing without 8 months of preparation, Weston was notified via certified mail. He called her 4 times that evening. She let it go to voicemail. The 5th time, she picked up. "You're divorcing me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was the voice of a man who had not considered this a real possibility. "Yes," she said. "Lynnette," he paused in a way that told her he was gathering something. An argument, an emotion, a version of himself that might work on her. "Can we talk about this?" "We can talk to our attorneys," she said. "I hope you're well, Weston." She hung up. She did not cry. She had already done her crying 6 months earlier, alone in her car in the parking lot of a grocery store, with the engine running and the rain coming down hard on the windshield. She had sat there for 22 minutes. And she had let it move through her. The grief, the humiliation, the strange, specific sadness of realizing that the person you built a life with never quite saw you. And then she had taken a breath and put the car in drive and gone home and made dinner, and the next morning she had called her attorney. There was nothing more to cry about. There was only forward. The divorce was straightforward in the ways that divorces are straightforward when one party has a very good lawyer and a very clear understanding of what they want. And Lynnette wanted the house in her name. Her mother had grown up on that street, and Lynnette had bought the house originally with money from a small inheritance before the marriage. She wanted her savings. She wanted her notebooks. She did not want alimony. This surprised Weston's attorney. It surprised Weston more. "She doesn't want anything from you," his attorney told him. "She's walking away clean." "That doesn't make sense," Weston said. His attorney gave him a look that said, quietly, that he thought Weston was missing something important. What Weston did not know, what he would not know for another 14 months, was that by the time the divorce was finalized, Lynnette's company had a name. Vantara. It had a registered trademark, a small but growing client list, and a second letter of intent from a freight company in Tennessee that was 3 times the size of the Ohio Pilot. She had hired 7 full-time employees. She had taken a small seed investment from a former professor who had known her work for 20 years and had been waiting for this phone call. She had not announced any of it. She was not ready to announce it. She understood timing. She moved into a rental apartment on the east side of the city. Clean, simple 2nd floor. Good light in the mornings. She kept the carved wooden box on the windowsill. She bought new coffee cups and found she liked mornings again. Her colleagues later told journalists that they had never worked for anyone with such a steady hand. She never panicked, one of them said. Even when things were hard. She would just get very quiet and then come back with a plan. She called this period of her life the good, hard part. Hard because she was building something real, and real things take everything you have. Good because she was building it. Weston Hale moved Britta into the Greystone Lane house. That was a choice he made about 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, and it was one of those choices that reveals more about a person than they intend to reveal. He told himself it was practical. He told himself Britta was good for him. She was energetic and decisive, and made the house feel less quiet. He had always found quiet unsettling. What he did not tell himself, because he was not in the habit of honest self-examination, was that moving Britta in was also a way of proving something. To himself, maybe, or to the general idea of Lynnette, who had walked out with her suitcase and her portfolio and her composure, and had not looked back. He had expected her to look back. He had expected grief from her, or anger, or at minimum some evidence that leaving him had cost her something. When none of that came, he found himself thinking about her more than he wanted to. Not with love, or not exactly, with something more uncomfortable than love, a suspicion that he had miscalculated. Britta noticed. "You're distracted," she said one evening. They were at dinner, a restaurant she had chosen because she liked being seen in certain kinds of places. "I'm fine," he said. "You're thinking about her again." He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. The thing about Britta, Weston was beginning to understand, was that she was very good at certain things, and those things did not include sitting quietly in the evenings with a book. She did not make coffee before he was awake. She did not notice the small things. She filled every room with energy, and he had mistaken that energy for vitality, for substance. And now, 9 months into the arrangement, he was beginning to wonder if the distinction mattered. It was not Lynnette's fault that he was making this comparison. But he was making it. 14 months after the divorce, Vantara Technologies issued its first public press release. Weston read it in his office on the 41st floor. The Lynnette in the photograph looked exactly like the Lynnette he had sat across from at breakfast 100 times, except she was looking directly at the camera with an expression he did not remember. Not defiance, not triumph, just certainty. Like someone who had been waiting a long time to stand in a specific place and had finally arrived there. He read the release 3 times. He called his assistant in and asked her to look up the company. She came back with a folder of information: the patent filings, the seed round details, the client list, the employee count. He looked at the dates. He looked at them again. "This was registered 4 years ago," he said. "Yes, sir," his assistant said. 4 years ago, Lynnette had been making his coffee and reading in the evenings and saying very little. 4 years ago, she had been sitting in the quiet. He had never thought to question. Building something he had never thought to ask about. He sat in his leather chair for a long time. After his assistant left the room, he thought about something Lynnette had said once, early in their marriage, when he had come home late from a dinner and made some careless remark about her career being on hold. She had looked at him with the mildest expression he had ever seen and said, "I'm not on hold, Weston, I'm thinking." He had laughed. He had assumed it was a graceful deflection. It had not been a deflection. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He was not the kind of man who apologized easily, and he told himself that calling her would look desperate, would look like the call it actually was. A man who had gotten the measure of his wife exactly wrong and now had to live with that. He did not call. But he thought about calling. He thought about it for a long time. The call came from a different direction. 3 weeks after the Vantara press release,
Weston received a proposal from his CFO about a potential acquisition target in the logistics software space.
It was a small but rapidly growing company with strong IP and a technology advantage that his own team had not been able to replicate, except in-house. It was, the CFO, exactly the kind of solve the supply chains and trying to solve a cyclicity problem they had been trying to address for 2 years. The company was Vantara. Weston read the proposal in his office with the door closed. He read it twice. The CFO had not made the connection. Lynnette had been using her maiden name, Oakes, and the company was new enough that its leadership had not yet become widely known outside the industry. But Weston knew. He sat with it for a day. Then he did something that did not come naturally to him. He called Lynnette directly, without going through attorneys, without going through intermediaries. He found her number in his phone, still there, still saved as Lynnette, and he called it. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Weston," she said. Not a question. Caller ID. She had been expecting this at some point, he realized. She was always expecting things at some point. "I read about Vantara," he said. "I have a proposal I'd like to send you." A pause, not a long one. "Send it to my business email," she said. "I'll have my team review it." "I was hoping we could speak in person," he said. Another pause. He had the distinct sensation that she was deciding something. Not about him, exactly, but about what the right thing to do was. With Lynnette, those 2 things had never been the same. "1 meeting," she said. "My office. Tuesday at 2. "Thank you," he said. She did not say of course or no problem, or any of the things people say to fill a silence. She said, "I'll see you then," and she hung up. He arrived early. He hadn't done that in years. Her office was on the 3rd floor of a converted industrial building on the north side of the city. Not flashy. Not corporate, in the way his building was corporate. There were plants everywhere. The walls were a deep, quiet green. The desks were full of people who looked very focused and very young and not at all like they were unhappy to be there. A young man at the front desk asked if he could get Weston anything while he waited. Weston said no. He sat in a chair that was not as expensive as his chair and watched the room. and thought about the fact that 6 years ago Lynnette had been sitting in his house, in a house he had thought of as his house, reading books in the evenings. He had never asked what she was reading. Lynnette came out at exactly 2 o'clock. She was wearing a navy blazer. Her hair was the same. Her expression was the same, that mild, attentive calm that he used to mistake for passivity and now understood was something else entirely. She shook his hand. Her grip was firm and brief. "Thanks for coming," she said, as if he were any other meeting. They sat across from each other at a small table in a glass-walled conference room. She had water on the table, nothing else. He had prepared things to say. He had prepared a version of the meeting that began with the acquisition proposal and stayed professional and did not go anywhere personal. He had told himself that was the right approach. He lasted about 4 minutes. "Lynnette," he said, "I know what I did." She looked at him without surprise. She had expected this too. "I know what I did," he said again, "and I know that an apology at this point I know it doesn't change anything. I'm not here to ask you to. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know that I understand what I had and what I did with it, and that I'm—" He stopped. The word sorry felt too small, and he had never been good at finding the bigger word. She let him stop. She didn't rush to fill the silence. "I know you know," she said finally. "I could tell you were starting to know toward the end. That's actually part of why I left when I did. It's easier when someone is still certain they're right." He absorbed that. "Were you ever going to tell me?" he asked. "About Vantara, about any of it?" She considered this, honestly. "If we had been different people," she said, "yes. But you didn't ask, Weston. In 12 years, you never once asked what I was thinking about. I don't think you knew there was anything to ask." He didn't argue. There was no argument. "The proposal your team sent," she said, shifting, not unkindly, but with a clarity that told him the personal portion of the meeting was over, "is interesting on the infrastructure side. But the valuation is low and the IP ownership structure they're suggesting doesn't work for me. I'm not interested in an acquisition. I would consider a licensing agreement on very specific terms." He nodded. He was, despite everything, paying attention. "I'll have my attorney send a counter," she said. "I do," he said. She stood. He stood. At the door he paused. "The wooden box," he said. "Your dad's. Is it? Do you still have it?" Something moved across her face. Not a lot. Lynnette had never been someone who showed a lot. "On my windowsill," she said, "every morning." He nodded. He didn't know why he had asked, exactly, except that it seemed important to know that she still had it, that she had kept the things that mattered. "Good," he said. She held the door. "Take care of yourself, Weston." He walked out through the green-walled office, past the focused young people, out into the street where his car was waiting. He sat in the back seat and did not tell the driver where to go for a long moment. He thought about 12 years, about coffee left on the counter, with the lid on, about evenings he had chosen not to be present for, about a woman sitting quietly in a room he was always passing through on his way to somewhere else, building something patient and real, and completely invisible to him. He thought about what it meant to look at a person every day and not see them. He had a lot to think about. Vantara Technologies did not accept Weston Hale's acquisition offer. The licensing agreement, after 4 months of negotiation, was signed on a Wednesday afternoon. It was a good deal for both companies, structured carefully, with clear terms and no ambiguity. Lynnette's attorney said it was the cleanest contract she had drafted all year. Weston signed his copy in his office on the 41st floor. He set down the pen and looked out the window at the city for a while. Britta had moved out 2 months earlier. That had been mutual and honest and quieter than he expected. He was alone in his office, and the building had his name on the side, and it had all come to him by his own effort, and none of it in that moment felt like the most important thing he had ever been part of. The most important thing he had ever been part of was a woman who had made his coffee and read in the evenings and built an $800 million company. In the time he wasn't paying attention, he had not been part of that at all. Lynnette did not spend a lot of time thinking about Weston Hale. She had come to understand, in the years since leaving Greystone Lane, that grief is not a fixed amount. That you can grieve a marriage and a decade and a version of yourself you thought was permanent. And when you come out the other side, There is still more life waiting. More life than you had in the before. She expanded Vantara's offices in the second year. She hired 43 people. She gave a keynote at an industry conference in Chicago and stood at a podium in front of 800 people and explained, clearly and without notes, how her system worked and why it solved something that had gone unsolved for too long. A journalist interviewing her, afterward, asked about her path to founding the company. What had pushed her? She thought about her father's workshop, about yellow legal pads, about evenings in a house where she was present and someone else was absent, and about what she had done with that silence instead of letting it hollow her out. I had a lot of time to think, she said. I used it. The journalist wrote it down. She moved on to the next question. Outside, the city was doing what cities do, loud and indifferent, and full of people all going somewhere. Lynnette finished the interview and walked back to her office and sat down at her desk, where the next problem was waiting. She looked at it. She got very still. Then she picked up her pen.